Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to a rainy Friday. And what else would you rather do than be in school? Yeah. Days like today make me really miss school because, it's rainy outside and it's Friday. Point one, I know you have a lot to do today regards to my class. You have the uh, 55-minute test. And I also put you a bunch of videos in there to watch. Here's an idea. Um, why don't you watch this Saturday or Sunday? In other words, you have so much to do today. Why don't you just turn me off and postpone seeing me until the weekend? Because you have that test as well as a bunch of videos to look at. And I actually heard you actually take other classes. Not that those classes are important, math. But yeah. Um, so today we are going to talk about the Reformation, beginning a new unit. I did not really get a chance to begin working on those first paragraphs. I will look at them over the weekend, get out grades for them. Thank you for your comments thus far about them. And, you know, 10 minutes is out of 45 minutes is a lot of time. But at the same time, the backbone of your paper is the thesis. And so, therefore, you don't want to waste time on any particular part of it, but you do want to have a good thesis statement for that. And, in that first paragraph is 2 points. And so, you want to go ahead and get that done and, be comfortable with it. So, yeah. But yeah, if next week I've already got a test prepared for next Friday. I mean, goodness, this test is coming up on us so fast now. And so, lots of reviewing to do between now and then. So let me get started. But yeah, if you would like, if you have other things to do, turn me off, come back to me tomorrow. And, I'll be back Monday, of course. And so I also, if you noticed in your assignments, I gave you the DBQ that is red, or, copper red or whatever. Just another way to think of it. But yeah, let's talk about this Reformation. Come here, you. Oh boy. I lost everything. Where are we? Right there. Pardon me for a moment. Let me pull that thing up. Have to do a little stuff here. Bum, 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 bum. I want to be able to see me. I don't know why. As well as, I mean, who knows? There may be an axe murderer behind me, so I want to be able to see behind me. All right. So sorry for so much dawdling, wasting your time. The Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation is one of the watershed landmarks in history. And once again, in saying that, historically, I'm not necessarily condoning Protestantism over Catholicism or vice versa. I mean, Martin Luther had many admirable attributes, one being able to stand up and speak out of his conscience, and at the same time, he was anti Semitic and sexist. He drank too much beer. Was a bit actually coarse, to be honest. But yeah, it is because here you have, for the first time, the Protestant Reformation leads to all kind of other things: free thinking, questioning of authority, um, individual rights, local control of government, all sorts of things. You know, the French Revolution comes out of the Protestant Reformation. Eventually, it can be argued. So yeah, let's get back to this. So yeah, the Protestants revolted across Europe against the long-standing Roman Catholic Church. Protestants, as it says there, were more impressed by human potential for doing evil than for its propensity to do good. I mean, that is kind of a major sticking point between the Protestant faiths and the Catholic faith. The Catholic faith is more about, you know, focusing on what human beings do that is good. Protestants are the don't you do that faith. Anyway, Protestants encouraged all people of authority to be firm disciplinarians. Protestant work ethic. Protestants like to go directly to the Greek and Hebrew manuscripts, study their religious roots. The Reformation came to be closely identified in the minds of its supporters in what today we think of as local control of governments. The Reformation occurs first in Germany and Switzerland. No coincidence there, because Germany and Switzerland were separated from Rome by the Alps, you know, great distance. Cities in Germany and Switzerland were in the midst of turmoil, social and political divisions. Certain groups favored the Reformation more than others, better believe it. In many places, guilds, labor unions, whose members were economically prospering and were very much in favor of the Reformation and its work ethic ideas. Yeah. In towns and villages, when Martin Luther began espousing a priesthood of believers, which is a term I've seen on somebody's test. It told of serfs and peasants that to dream of freedom from bondage was not necessarily an evil thing. Peasants' traditional liberties of hunting and fishing being taken away by the local lords, and so the Reformation appealed to many peasants, but for non-spiritual reasons. The Protestant Reformation could not have occurred without several other contributing circumstances. The Babylonian exile in Avion, the Great Schism. In other words, all these, I talked about this a little bit yesterday. The Roman Catholic Church had, for the past 300 years, had egg on its face. Meaning that corruption, meaning that the Crusades, meaning that the Black Death had come, and church had just looked bad. And, you know, it's very hard if you want people to do what you want them to do, if you want to be the leader of people, to keep striking out, to keep making errors. And the Catholic Church was not having a good run. And it was corrupt. So, for many people, the Catholic Church had ceased to provide a viable foundation of religious piety. In other words, the Roman Catholic Church no longer practiced what it was preaching on Sundays. The late Middle Ages were marked by independent lay and clerical efforts to reform local religious practice. You say, what does that mean? I mean, there were people who tried to reform the Catholic Church, both from within the church as priests, but also from without, lay, meaning non-ordained officials from outside the church. Common people were becoming increasingly aware of the world, and that perhaps, thank you, Johann Gutenberg, that perhaps the Roman Catholic Church was not being completely honest with them, and perhaps the Roman Catholic Church was abusing their own power. There were new lay, there's that word again. It means non-ordained, it means not officially part of the church. New lay religious movements formed and were more and more concerned with the imitation of Christ Jesus as opposed to the rule of the Roman Catholic Church. The Brothers of the Common Life, also later known as the Modern Devotion, was one of these groups. It was established by Gerard Groot, also called the Modern Devotion, was centered at the city of Zwolle and Deventer in the Netherlands. Brothers and sister houses of the devotion spread rapidly throughout Northern Europe. And these houses stressed individual piety and practical The brothers also sponsored many students and conducted schools for the young, especially boys entering the priesthood. All right. So Thomas Kempis summarized the philosophy of the brothers of the common life in what can be known in the most popular book of its time called The Imitation of Christ. The modern devotion also permitted lay people to practice a full religious life without surrendering their life in the world as well. The Roman Catholic Church, however, was showing large cracks in its very foundation. The long entrenched benefice system, meaning that certain people, because of their birth, had rights within the Catholic Church, had permitted important ecclesiastical posts, that means religious posts, to be sold to the highest bidders, and had left residency requirements to parishes unenforced, meaning that there were lots and lots of priests living in Europe who, instead of going and living in their home parishes, they just stayed in the bigger cities like Rome where the action was, so they could party down and sleep in more comfortable beds. They, meaning these same priests, milked the local church revenues, often performed their chores mechanically, and had neither firsthand knowledge nor concern with the needs of the local populace. Many priests couldn't even read. And yeah, that was a thing. Of course, the thing that throws the monkey wrench into everything is the sale of indulgences. The sale of indulgences. Please make a difference. It's not just indulgences, it's the sale of indulgences was a major issue. In other words, the practice of indulgences, in other words, shortening one's time in purgatory. That's what an indulgence is. The church granting a person shortening of its time in purgatory. Yes, purgatory, that middle ground between heaven and hell. Purgatory, the universe's largest waiting room with no comfortable chairs and no interesting magazines to read. And so the church at first awarded indulgences, and later on they found out that it was very lucrative that they could sell these things. So indulgences were sold not only for the reduction of one's own time in purgatory, but you could also buy them for dead relatives. I mean, it was a great money-making scheme. Local lords even encouraged the practice as long as they were cut in on the profits. When a sale was primarily for a distant entrance, such as the one we're talking about now, which was the building of St. Peter's Church in Rome, which took a lot of indulgences to sell, the local laity and the lords protested because they weren't getting any of the benefits of the sale of indulgences. Churches and monasteries were exempt from local taxes and laws that affected others. They were treated as places of sacral peace and asylum, meaning that if you belonged to the first estate, you didn't have to pay taxes, you didn't have to do night watch, you didn't have to volunteer to serve in the local militia like everybody else did. It was considered inappropriate for holy persons to be burdened with such dirty jobs as military service, compulsory labor, the corvée, standing watch at the gate, or other obligations of citizenship. The clergy came to enjoy immunity of place, which exempted their properties from taxes, and immunity of person, which exempted the clergy from the jurisdiction of civil courts. Martin Luther, by placing his 95 Theses on the door of the church at Wittenberg, signaled the popularly held beginnings of the Protestant Reformation. The date, October 31st, 1517. All Souls Day and on the eve of All Saints Day. Don't want to get too much into this, but Martin Luther, he nailed that list on the door. It was more of a symbolic act than anything else, because you got to remember, most of the people in the parish couldn't read. And so he was doing a symbolic thing. He was firing a shot across the bow of the practice of indulgences. All right, let's talk a little bit about our friend Martin Luther. So, as popular resentment of the clerical immunities and ecclesiastical abuses, especially those are big words. In other words, people didn't like the fact that officials in the Roman Catholic Church were taking advantage of their positions. Opposition to the Roman Catholic Church grew. National opposition, unorganized and organized. Luther had been educated by the Brothers of Common Life. He was supposed to study law. He promised his dad, but he never did. He was in a thunderstorm as a child and prayed to Saint Anne for deliverance and promised that if he survived this thunderstorm, he would enter a monastery if he survived. He did, and he kept his promise. He earned a doctorate of theology in 1512, became leader within the monastery and the spiritual life of the city of Wittenberg. And, Luther's a very prominent student. Had he not done the Reformation thing, he would have probably, had a bright career in the Roman Catholic Church. So, Luther was a proponent of the idea of justification by faith alone, meaning that, remember the triangle I made you. God, you, church, triangle. Martin Luther said, don't need the church, just you and God. Justification by faith alone. All you have to do is believe upon the forgiveness of Christ, and then it's okay. As he said, the righteousness of God did not result from many religious works and ceremonies, but was given, ceremonies being the 7 sacraments, but was given in full measure to those who believe and trust in Jesus Christ, who alone is perfect righteousness satisfying to God. Basically saying, don't need the church. You need faith between you and God. And as we've already went over, an indulgence was a remission for the temporal penalty imposed. In other words, we all know what an indulgence is, hopefully. It basically is forgiveness of a sin that gets you out of purgatory for a certain amount of time. Because trust me, the idea is that everybody having sinned had lots of time stored up in purgatory, and an indulgence could reduce that time. So, penitents might perform some work of satisfaction through prayer, almsgiving, giving to the poor, retreats, pilgrimages. Originally, indulgences had been given during the Crusades. Of course, those guys needed a lot of indulgences. But in Luther's time, they were simply sold for money. And the penitent in the process was just, he received a piece of paper, had the Pope's seal on it, and he was also not informed, oh yeah, for this to work, you need to be sorry for your sins as well. And that's why it became very obvious to Luther that the Roman Catholic Church was interested primarily in money. And that's what set him off. In 1517, half of these indulgences were to go to the Albrecht, the Fugger banking house, and the other half to Pope Leo X, and were sold by this guy, Johann Tetzel. Luther protested that the sale of indulgences made it appear that salvation could be bought and sold. Now, at the time, Charles V was the new Habsburg King of Spain, and also the Holy Roman Emperor. Luther entered into a debate over the alleged abuse of the Roman Catholic Church in Leipzig on June 27, 1519, with a professor by the name of Jan Eck of Ingolstadt. During this debate, Luther challenged the infallibility of the Pope. That means challenged the idea that the Pope can't make mistakes. And the inerrancy of church councils, meaning that, the church councils can't make mistakes, deferring directly to the sovereignty. In other words, Luther said the Pope can be wrong, these church councils can be wrong. The only thing that is right is found within the scriptures. Luther wrote 3 famous pamphlets detailing his positions: The Babylonian Captivity of the Church, which attacked the 7 sacraments, saying that of the 7, only 2, that being baptism and the Eucharist, communion, were scriptural. He also wrote Freedom of a Christian, which summarized the idea of salvation by faith alone. In his book, The Address to the Christian Nobility of the German Nation, Luther urged the German princes to force reforms upon the church, especially to curtail its political and economic power in Germany. That really appealed to the German princes because the princes of northern Germany were looking for some way to get out from under the Roman Catholic Church. Machiavelli was right as rain again when he said that, big part of this is not religious, it's about sex, money, and power. And so, yeah, a lot of German princes saw Luther's protest against the church as an opportunity to break away, to get out from under the Roman Catholic Church, and to keep all that money that was going every week to Rome in their province. So Pope Leo X, who finally excommunicates Martin Luther eventually, issued the papal bull, direct order of the Pope, Exsurge Domine, gave Luther 60 days to recant or face excommunication. On January 3rd, 1521, Luther was excommunicated through the writing of the papal bull Decet Pontificum Romanum. Luther appeared before the Diet of Worms presided over by Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, where he was ordered to recant and refused. Diet of Worms, again, is not a nasty thing to eat. Diet of Worms. Diet means council, a committee. And Worms is a city in Germany. So it was this council in Worms, which Charles V presided over, and Luther was told to recant. In other words, to say, I didn't really mean that. And he refused. And remember our buddy Rick Steve, don't you love him? Don't you miss him? Rick Steve said that Luther, upon leaving the debate, was kidnapped. So he disappeared. And actually he was kidnapped by Frederick the Wise, this prince in northern Germany who liked Luther a lot. And Luther then went into hiding for a year because he became an outlaw. Outlaw meaning, of course, our term outlaw means something else. An outlaw meaning that he was outside the law, therefore anyone can kill him and actually get a reward for doing so. So anyway, Luther then took refuge with the Prince of Northern Germany for several years, and during this time, he translated the New Testament into German. Once again, the idea that every man's his own priest, and so you need to be your own priest. You need to be able to read the scriptures so that you can find out what you need to do to enter heaven. So Charles V was not able to take directly after Luther because he was too busy. I mean, he had other wars to deal with. Between 1521 and 1529, Spain and France fought 4 major wars over disputed territories in Italy. We've already talked about that. Yeah. The Turks had overrun Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs, and the French fought the Spanish in the Second Habsburg War. In other words, basically, he's busy. He can't chase Martin Luther. He's busy. So Charles then declared the German Diet of Speyer in 1526 that each German prince could decide whether or not to enforce the Edict of Worms, which condemned Luther. And later on, the Peace of Augsburg would make that Peace of Augsburg of 1562, would make that policy official. Note the fact that the Protestant Reformation became more of a political cause than a religious one. The German princes saw this as an opportunity to cut into the profitable business of the Roman Catholic Church, as well as an opportunity to wrestle political control from Catholic-sponsored rulers. Yeah, it became a political and economic struggle. Roman numeral 8. By 1525, Luther had lost many of his followers originally and gained others. For example, he lost the peasants. Peasants, once again, heard Luther's message and thought this was an opportunity. This meant we could gain freedom for ourselves. Luther sympathized with these peasants and even went so far as to teach that the simple life of the peasants was actually what God had intended. Luther, however, did not encourage the peasants, and when they revolted, actually, Luther was shocked by the violence of the revolt And he condemned their revolt in the strongest terms and urged the local princes to crush this revolt without mercy, which they did. Between 70,000 and 100,000 peasants were killed in this peasants' revolt. And what that will do then, that will cause, going forward, peasants throughout much of Europe to simply reject the Protestant church because it feels like Luther had sold them out. All right. Roman numeral 9. The Reformation in other parts of Europe, particularly Switzerland, even though inspired by Luther's works, were different. Switzerland was a loose confederation of autonomous states trying to not be ruled by the Italians or German princes or Austrian princes. Some of these cantons were Catholic, some were Protestant, and some made compromise. Two issues dominated Swiss Reformation: nationalism and a resentment of the use of Swiss mercenaries in foreign wars, and also the desire for church reform. Ulrich Zwingli, who is on a test, not today, but led much of the Reformation in Switzerland. He was strongly influenced by Erasmus. He opposed self-indulgences because he, as a priest, had an affair with a barber's daughter. He pushed for the end of celibacy, the priesthood. He said that whatever lacked literal backing in the scripture did not exist in the Christian world. Luther, though, and Zwingli disagreed over the policy of transubstantiation, which is also on a test that you'll see next Friday. Transubstantiation, the idea that when you ingest the host and drink the wine at communion, it actually becomes the body and blood of Christ, physically. Zwingli engaged in a Protestant Catholic civil war in Switzerland, was wounded, and then executed, and his remains were scattered so that his followers could not use the relics as something to unify them, whatever. All right. The treaty that followed then allowed each of Switzerland's 13 cantons to decide for themselves whether to be Protestant or Catholic. All right. Roman numeral 10. Moderate reforms offered by Luther and Zwingli caused some Protestants to become more radical in their approach towards Christianity. The most important of these groups were the Anabaptists. They were the predecessors of the Amish. The Anabaptists were the predecessors of the Amish and the Mennonites. Anabaptism means against baptism or rebaptism. Anabaptists simply were people who rejected the idea of infantile baptism. Conrad Grebel, who was looked upon as the father of the Anabaptist movement, performed the first adult rebaptism. Grebel's group was called the Church of the Brethren, the Swiss Brethren. In the lifetime confession of 1527, this group condemned war, refused to swear oaths, and to participate in offices of government. Anabaptists separated themselves from others as a way of rejecting the world. Offshoots of this movement further down the road will be the Mennonites and the Amish. So, part F. Lutherans and Zwinglians both opposed the Anabaptist movement and persecuted them. In fact, Anabaptism became a capital offense. You could be executed for being an Anabaptist or for either performing or taking part in a rebaptism ceremony. Between 1525 and 1618, at least 1,000, perhaps 5,000 Anabaptists were executed for their faith and rebaptizing themselves. In the city of Munster, Anabaptists held a majority and forced others to either convert or leave, which many of them did. The city of Munster was taken by besieging armies, and the leaders of the Anabaptist movement were hung. Simons began a moderate branch of Anabaptism known as the Mennonites. Spiritualists did away with all religious traditions of the Catholic Church. Anti-Trinitarians rejected Calvinism. Anti-Trinitarians meaning people who were against the idea of the Holy Trinity and its belief in original sin and predestination, but they were defenders of religious toleration. In the second half, now we're on Roman rule 11, Second half of the 16th century, your friend and mine, John Calvin. Yes, Calvin and Hobbes. John Calvin replaced Luther as the dominant Protestant authority. Calvin and Luther, once again, they are contemporaries. They knew of each other. They didn't know each other. John Calvin was born in 1509 to a wealthy family in Switzerland. He was another person who was in line to become a Roman Catholic priest, lead a comfortable life. He had all the advantages of wealth, including the benefices from the Roman Catholic Church to go to his education at the University of Paris. However, he gave up these benefices upon his conversion to Protestantism in 1534, the same year that Henry VIII passed the Act of Supremacy in England, 1534. He moved to Strasbourg, France, and became pastor to the exiles from persecution. Calvin and his followers were motivated above all by the desire to transform all of society morally. However, Calvin participated in the capture and execution of other religious reformers, Michael Severidus in 1553, a man who denied the doctrine of the Trinity. Now, the only thing that you want to see in that is that both Calvin and Luther, who are held up now as, individuals of merit, individuals who have been memorialized. The Lutheran Church, Calvin University in Michigan, they were also men of violence. They did not object to violence, which, interesting. So, Roman numeral 12. By 1530, the Reformation was firmly entrenched in Europe, but it would go through several periods of upheaval before it would be a recognized religious movement. The Habsburg Emperor Charles V of Spain basically dictated the edicts from the Diet of Augsburg, but Protestantism by that time was too firmly entrenched to allow that to have a real effect. Charles V was restrained from acting on this by his renewed conflicts with the French. In other words, Charles V would have liked to have done something about Martin Luther and all these Protestants, but he was too busy with foreign wars. German Lutherans, led by Luther's friend Philip Melanchthon, the preceptor of Germany, oversaw the enactment of educational reforms that included compulsory primary education, because you have to be able to read the Bible. Education for girls. Wow, there's a thought. Humanist revisions of the curriculum and instructions for the laity in the new religion. In Denmark, Lutheranism became the official state religion. In Sweden, King Gustavus Vasa, not Gustavus Adolphus, Gustavus Vasa, greedy for church property, embraced Lutheranism so that he could put his hands on, Roman Catholic Church land, and subjected the clergy to royal authority. In Poland, because of the lack of a strong central government, allowed major sects of Christianity to coexist, and Poland became a model of religious pluralism and toleration in the second half of the 16th century. That's true. Casimir the Great had invited Jews to live in Krakow, in Poland, during this time. And the Jews in Poland as a whole, Poland had one of the largest Jewish populations. 10% of the population of Poland was Jewish by World War II. And I've gotten off the subject, forgive me. So Charles V tried to get the Protestants to curb their actions through negotiations. When that did not succeed, he turned to a military option. This is a reference to what we'll talk about later on, the Defenestration of Prague, where Charles V sends a bunch of representatives down to Prague, says, hey, you Protestants, why don't you cool it? And they threw them out the window of like a 6-story building and into a pile of manure, which saved their lives, ironically. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. So in 1547, his armies crushed the Protestant Schmalkaldic League He established puppet rulers in Saxony and Hesse, and forced the Protestants to readopt old Catholic customs. After suffering defeat in 1552 at the hands of the Protestants, Charles V reinstated Protestant leadership and guaranteed Lutheran religious freedom at the Peace of Passau. The Peace of Augsburg, 1552, established the rule of test question, cuius regio, ius religio. Each prince decides the religion of his province, which meant that the ruler of a land would determine the religion of the land. Also, any Roman Catholic land seized prior to 1552 would remain in Protestant hands. But the Peace of Augsburg only applied to Lutheranism and not Calvinism or Anabaptism. Calvinists led nationalist-type revolutions throughout Northern Europe in the second half of the 16th century. Okay. Roman numeral 13. Let's talk about the Protestant Reformation in England. Let's not say we did, okay? You've got enough to do today. Hopefully you're not looking at this on Friday. Hopefully you've said, I'm going to look at that over the weekend, okay? And we're going to finish this chapter and even go into the next chapter on Protestant wars. Wars of the Reformation in the next chapter. And so, yeah, I'm going to shut it down for today, and we will pick up on Monday. Good luck in taking your test. So, yes, thank you very much. I'm going to shut down now and enjoy some Coke Zero.